Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Lizzie, and for today's video, we are on to the next film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which is Freddy vs. Jason. So I have seen this one. It's just been a while since I've watched it. So I'm very interested to see how this one's gonna go. I don't have highest of hopes, but I feel like I've heard good and bad things about this film. I feel like it's definitely kind of a fan favorite just in the horror world, because obviously you're taking these two infamous iconic characters and pitting them against each other. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and I will be right back with my thoughts.
Warn your friends. Warn everyone.
Welcome to my nightmare. Freddy vs. Jason.
Place your bets.
Okay, so just finished with watching Freddy vs. Jason, and yeah, I really didn't remember much from this film. It had been so long since I had watched this one, and I actually really quite enjoyed this one. I thought it was really good. It's a lot darker. It gets a lot darker than I think some of the previous Nightmare on Elm Street films. As we know, they started to get a little bit more goofy, so I don't know if that's just the introduction of Jason in this whole thing, that they kept it quite dark. There were, obviously Freddy had some kind of jokey comedic moments, but even those were really, really dark, like very much more reminiscent of kind of the original Freddy. I do feel like this one kind of has to fall almost after Wes Craven's New Nightmare, just because of all of the information and stuff that we learned in New Nightmare, with Freddy being like this entity. If you haven't seen my review for that one, make sure you check it out. But this one really just kind of is like Freddy as the Freddy we've known up until this point. I will say the only thing with watching this one is that I'm not completely caught up with the whole Friday the 13th franchise. Like, I have not seen all of those films. So I think with Jason kind of, I guess, like being dead in the beginning of this one, it was like, okay, so they're both dead and they're both coming back. They do address that at one point in the film, that Jason is basically buried at Camp Crystal Lake and pops up whenever people try to come back. So Freddy basically takes advantage of that to make people remember him. That's really what like happens in this film. Is it's been several years, people have forgotten about Freddy, the town has erased every evidence of him, there is no news articles, anyone who did remember, they actually locked up in an institute, which I thought was really interesting and really clever, and pretty realistic. I feel like, especially with a small town, I feel like Springwood's meant to feel like a very small Ohio town, and as someone from a very small Ohio town, it definitely gives that vibe. And so I think in a situation like that, where you have the small town, everybody is aware of the situation and what is going on, and they all kind of come to this agreement that to defeat Freddy once and for all, they need to forget, and anyone that does remember gets locked away, and they get treated with the pills, or the same pills that I think they use in the third film to stop people from dreaming. So they can still sleep, they just don't dream, so then they don't dream about Freddy. And everybody just thinks that they are crazy. So definitely seemed a really smart and realistic route to go. Now, the Freddy versus Jason aspect of this film doesn't really come into play until quite a bit later in it. It's quite a long film, but we really just kind of have Jason killing people, Freddy trying to come back to kill people, and then when he realizes that Jason isn't going to stop and just like go home, he has to then try to defeat Jason. And so we have the Elm Street kids versus Freddy versus Jason, everybody versus everybody situation going on in the film. Which at first you're just like, okay, this is supposed to be like a Freddy versus Jason, when are we getting to that? But I still like that aspect. I still like the fact that I really did like the fact that this film had a well-organized, well-played-out storyline. There really weren't like a lot of plot holes, I felt like. Again, haven't really been caught up on the Friday the 13th franchise, so maybe there's some on the Jason side, but as far as with watching all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, again, not really necessarily including Wes Craven's New Nightmare, if you kind of ignore that, everything that happens in this film makes sense. Again, bring up Freddy's backstory, we get a whole visual replay of that. We also get a like play-by-play of scenes and details from the previous films, which I also think was really smart, just in case people forgot things. Obviously, I've been marathon watching them, so it's pretty easy for me to remember. I like that Freddy is aware and telling the stories of everything that happens to him throughout the franchise that has led to this desperation to resurrect Jason. Now, the cast of this film was fantastic. We obviously have Katharine Isabelle in this. She is not our main protagonist, not our final girl, but she's one of the best friends. She does a really good job in this, as always. Love her. So I was very much excited to see her sad when she got killed off, which I'll kind of get to talking about her scene in a second. I also like the fact Jason Ritter is in this, who is always fantastic. We also have Brendan Fletcher in this, who, if you don't recognize him by name, you would definitely recognize his face. He's been in a ton of stuff. He was also in multiple of the Ginger Snaps films, which I thought was really cool, because obviously so is Katharine Isabelle. So you have that little tie-in of those two actors. They've been in some stuff together. So thought that was also really cool. Now for some kind of problems I have a little bit with this film. I felt like Laurie's character, I really liked her. I think the actress that played her did really well. This is a very small nitpicky thing, but within that first scene, when we're introduced to the new set of Elm Street kids, and they're all hanging out and drinking and chilling at Laurie's house, they mentioned twice in that scene why Laurie's not dating, and it's two different reasons. Firstly, it's her, like, still madly in love with the Will character, who they dated when they were, like, 14, which I get it, when you're, like, 14, you think that's the love of your life, but at this time, she's a lot older. In her case, it does actually end up to be true. But not only that, but then they mention her mother's death, and that being the reason why she's not dating, which is also very, like, reminiscent of Scream. Like, literally, she's having a conversation with another character, and she's like, and her friend's like, you haven't dated since, and she's like, since my mother died? And it just reminded me very much of, like, with Sydney and Stu, and how Stu, like, just kind of kept trying to, like, guilt her about not sleeping with him, and she was like, asshole, my mother was raped and murdered, like, fuck you. And so definitely reminded me of that, which, I mean, I kind of have that ability to tie Scream to just about anything. Now, another issue I kind of took with this film, it didn't really bother me a whole lot. It was just kind of like, oh dear lord, this film's real grapey. There is a scene, obviously, with Katharine Isabelle's character where she is drunk and passed out in a field, and so she starts having the dreams about Freddy, and that guy comes along and starts trying to sexually assault her, and of course, when Jason kills him, I'm like, fuck yeah, good for you, because fuck that dude. That scene, there is, I mean, Freddy has a history of being a little like that towards female characters and kind of male characters as well. You don't discriminate. And obviously in the remake, which we'll get to, it's heavily more so implied that Freddy was not just a child murderer, but a full-on pedophile. But like scenes with him and Tori, there's like one scene where he's about to kill her and he's like, the first time can get really messy. And then when they get to Camp Crystal Lake, there's a scene where Tori's dreaming again. And there's these counselors having sex, and she's like, are you gonna help the kid? And then it turns out to, like, be Freddy in a dead body. Like, there was just several moments throughout this film that were just crossing that line. And, again, didn't horribly bother me. Like, I'm not gonna completely write off that film because of it, but it was just like, come on, people, like, really? We gotta be putting that stuff in, like, Catherine Isabel's character could have easily just been passed out and having this dream, and Jason could have come along and killed her. Like, they didn't have to insert that as well. It was just, bleh. Like, I just hate it. But anyway, aside from those kind of small nitpicky things, I really overall enjoyed this film. Like I said, it was a lot darker. I think that the concept of this film bringing two very different characters together that are seemingly from different worlds and putting them in one could go very wrong. But I think they did a really good job of this. Obviously, it ends with Jason popping up out of the water. That's kind of his signature move. And he's holding Freddy's head, and Freddy gives a wink, which is also a very kind of signature Freddy thing. So leading to obviously be that neither of these characters are actually dead or defeated. Could have led way to another one. This one came out in like 2003, I think. So it's been a real long time. I don't know if that's something that they'll ever do again, or I know people have wanted to bring in like a third character. That I don't really know how that would work. I think that this one is just perfectly fine as it is, and don't know if we need to resurrect anymore. But let me know what your thoughts are on Freddy vs. Jason down in the comments below. If you did enjoy this, please do give it a big old thumbs up. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button for more horror-related content. Again, if you have not seen any of my previous reviews, there will be a link to a playlist down in the description, and I will see you all again later with another video. Bye!